Hello friends, welcome to ENTRANCEADVISER.com. In this video, I'll be talking about evolution, that is class 12 biology, and for unit 7 and chapter 7. This is the lecture 1. So let's start the video. Before starting the video, you should subscribe our channel if you haven't. So let's move on. So what is origin of life? Origin of life is considered unique events in the history of the universe. Huge clusters of galaxies comprises the universe. Galaxies contain stars and clouds of dust and smoke. Big Bang theory attempts to explain the origin of the universe. According to this theory, a huge explosion occurs that forms the different galaxies. In the solar system of the Milky Way galaxies, the Earth has been supposed to be formed about 4.5 billion years ago. There was no atmosphere in the early Earth. Water vapor, methane, carbon dioxide, and ammonia released from molten mass covered the Earth's surface. The UV rays from the sun splits the water into hydrogen and oxygen. Life appeared 500 million years after the formation of the Earth. Okay, the gradual development of the life from the simple to complex organisms from inanimate objects, that is the non-living objects, spontaneously is called the origin of life. Okay, the innumerable living organisms present in this world are simply bewildering. The scientists have been able to record only a part of them. Investigations have shown that the living forms do not represent isolated and unrelated examples taken at random from the multiplicity of the organisms existing at the present day. Instead, there exists an interrelationship between the various forms. This idea has been unanimously accepted by all concerned. Since it is backed by numerous scientific investigations and their results from all branches of science, it is meant that in the natural world there has been in operation a process known as organic evolution. So through this process, all living things evolve from the pre-existing forms, that is the previous forms. This means that the more complex forms have been derived from the simpler forms, and as much the living world may be considered as a series of increasing complexity. The definition of the evolution is that the organic evolution means the changing from one form of life into another nearly similar to the previous one by the process of reproduction and accompanied by the variation and heredity. So the origin of life. Let's move into D. There were many theories and the stories suggesting how life might have originated on the earth. According to some God, the supreme power and the creator of this universe and all the living forms. The theory of the spontaneous generation is the oldest theory about the origin of life. According to this theory, the living organisms were formed spontaneously from the non-living things or the non-living matter. And the naturalistic theory suggested that the life originated when the inorganic and the organic compounds undergoing gradual evolution formed the cell structures. The Earth, originating about 5 billion years ago, contained carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and hydrogen. With the gradual cooling, these elements reached with another to form simple inorganic compounds like water and methane ammonia, forming the Earth's atmosphere. Clouds formed from the water vapor came down as rain. So, the Earth's continuous rain led to formation of the water bodies, and similar compounds reacted with each other during the lightning to form these organic compounds. Amino acids, nucleic acids, starches, proteins were also formed. The molecules of these organic compounds from aggregates called the coacervates in the water body. So the coacervates developed essential characteristics of life. There is a great metabolism and the reproduction. So they were the first living things formed about 3.5 billion years ago. Okay, there are the different theories regarding the origin of life. As I've said, let's have a look or in the summary. Some scientists believe that the life comes from other planets. Early Greek thinker thought that the unit of the life is called spores transferred from other planets. According to this theory, the life comes out dead and decaying matters like straw and mud. This theory is called spontaneous origin. And the Louis Pasteur experimentally proved that life arises only from the pre-existing life. Spontaneous theory of origin of life is dismissed after that. And Oppering and Halden uh, proposed that the first form of life could have come from the pre-existing non-living organic molecules like the RNA and the protein, etc. The formation of the life preceded by the chemical evolution. I have discussed this. Okay, at the time condition on the Earth were high temperature volcanic eruption, reducing atmosphere contain methane and ammonia. So there are several theories and several concepts regarding the origin of life on the Earth. So there are some modern ideas on the origin of life. That is, one of them is Oppering. That is, in 1924, suggested that the possibility of a biogenetic formation of the simplest organic substances, hydrocarbons. This he argues that led to the formation of the protein-like compounds and then colloidal systems which were capable to give rise to life through gradual improvement. Stanley L. Miller in 1953 made a historical experiment for the abiotic synthesis of the organic matter. Assuming the then physical condition of the earth, he had set an experiment where the mixture of gases were kept in a sterilized closed flask through which the high frequency of spark was discharged. Okay. However, during this experiment, a small amount of water was boiled to produce the water vapor. After a week, it was found that a mixture of various amino acids was obtained with intermediate products of aldehydes and HCN. And subsequent to abiotic synthesis to organic matters, an almost clear idea of the possible origin of life is gathered also. In 1982, the Crick recently discussed the problem of origin of life. He emphasized that the earth does not provide enough time for the origin of life. However, he believed that the life on the earth could have originated elsewhere in our galaxy, the Milky Way, and later dispatched to the earth. So, in this experiment, what was done? The Miller experiment of origin of life. S.L. Miller in 1920 conducted an experiment to show the origin of life on the earth in the physical environment similar to conditions prevails at that time. Miller created similar conditions of temperature and pressure in the laboratory scale. He created electric discharge in a flask containing methane, hydrogen, and ammonia and water vapor at 800 degrees Celsius. He observed the formation of amino acids in the flask after 15 days of electric discharge. Similar experiments by other scientists found formation of sugars, nitrogen bases, pigments, and fats. Analysis of meteorite content also reveals similar compounds that reveal the similar processes are occurring elsewhere in the space. The experimental evidence about the origin of life is called the chemical evolution of life. So it may come in your exam, okay? So Earth is believed to have originated about 4,600 million years ago. How life originated is a matter of speculations and vague guesses. At the time of its formation, Earth was so hot that everything in it was in its gaseous form. So condensation and cooling down to the clouds and the gaseous and cosmic dust of radioactive elements was thought to be the reason behind the formation of the earth. The experiments existed in the forms of gases and vapor in the hot environment. The cooling of earth caused condensation of gases which resulted in the formation of the solid crust of the earth. The torrential rain of the thousands of years formed water bodies like oceans, rivers, lakes, etc. Some elements present in the primitive atmosphere was iron, nickel, aluminum, silicon, phosphorus, sulfur, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, carbon, etc. The atoms combine to form molecules and the hydrogen and methane respectively. Organic compounds like amino acids, carbohydrates, and adenine nucleosides and nucleotides, protein, nucleic acids, nucleoproteins were formed. The proteins and organic and inorganic molecules were accumulated and were surrounded by the membrane to form the first cell. Okay, the protoplasm and the nucleus were formed due to the favorable conditions. Life first originated in the seawater. With the further cooling of the earth, nitrogen, oxygen, and carbon dioxide replaced methane and ammonia. New organisms originated and evolved from the pre-existing forms. Recent studies reveals that the single-celled cyanobacteria-like organisms were present in the earth long before the conditions on the primordial earth was different from that found now. The earth's atmosphere at that time was reducing and now it is oxidizing. The Russian biochemist Alexander Ivanovich Oparin in 1923 and English biologist J.B.S. Halley in 1928 suggested a theory that the complex organic molecules would have been seen formed through a series of chemical reactions. As I said, it is called the chemical evolution of life. So, would have been formed through a series of chemical reactions. Oparin in 1924 suggested the possibility of a biogenic formation of the simplest organic substances and hydrocarbons. These led to a formation of the protein-like compounds and later on the colloidal system which gave rise to the life through the gradual improvement. Organic compounds like water, ammonia, methane, alcohol and amino acids within the water bodies produced the hot soup and the primordial soup, where the smaller organic compounds combine together to form large organic compounds like polypeptides, proteins, nucleic acids, carbohydrates, etc. These compounds produce the first living cell. Okay, and the process involved the formation of the living cells through the simple inorganic and organic non-living organisms or the elements is called the biogenesis. Halden's and Oparin's theory supported the idea of a biogenesis or the spontaneous generation, that is the life originated from non-living matter. The first formed compound was a nucleoprotein which formed the chemical characteristics of genes. They combined to form colloidal masses at the ocean beds. Globules formed from these masses were converted by the fatty acids forming selectively permeable covering membrane. And enzymes and other compounds were formed within the globules and are called coacervates which gradually transformed into the living cell. So the early atmosphere of the earth was devoid of oxygen. Chemoheterotrophs must have originated first. The anaerobic chemoautotrophs obtaining energy by the biodegradation and the chemical compounds for the synthesis of the photoautotrophic organisms were anaerobes. Cyanobacteria was the first photosynthetic organism which evolved about 3300 million years ago. Release of oxygen due to photosynthesis gradually converted the Earth's atmosphere into the oxidizing one. The presence of the free oxygen is thought to be present about the origin of life on the today's Earth. According to the Oparin, the biotic components of the first living forms were the organizations and of the polypeptide, the polynucleotide and the other macromolecules. Okay, these underwater chemical reactions, some of were selected in the evolutionary process and have been progressively improved. Reducing atmosphere was essential for the abiotic synthesis, so they created this. Free oxygen would have destroyed the intermediate products in such synthesis. This led to a conclusion that in the past, life originated from the Earth's inorganic atmosphere, but it does not happen now. As in oxidizing atmosphere, even if the molecules are produced through, they would be absorbed and digested by the living forms, the existing on the today's Earth. Okay. Now the life can originate only from the pre-existing life forms. This fact was established by the fundamental principle of biogenesis by the Louis Pasteur. Okay. So, experimental representation of the Miller's experiment was done. The first non-cellular forms of life could have originated 3 billion years back. They could have been giant molecules like RNA, protein, and the polysaccharide. I said the cellular form of life was probably a single cell and originates in the water medium, as I said, in the sea. The theory that the first form of life arose slowly through the evolutionary from the non-living molecules is called the biogenesis. So I have already discussed in detail, so keep that in mind and move further. Evidence of the evolution. The evidence that the evolution of life forms has taken place on the earth have many proofs as mentioned below. The planetological evidence that given age rock sediments contain fossil of the different life forms that probably died during the formation of the particular sediment. Fossils are remains of the harder parts of the life forms found in rocks. So the study showed that the different forms varied over time and certain life forms are restricted geological time span. Hence, new forms of life have arisen at different times in the history of the earth. Homologous organs. So those organs that perform different functions, keep in mind, that have the similar origin and the structure are called homologous organs. For example, human, cheetah, bat and whales share the similarities in the pattern of bones for forelimbs, although these forelimbs perform different functions in these animals. These animals' similar structure developed along different directions due to the adoption of different needs, and this is called divergent evolution. Analogous structures. They are not anatomically similar organs but performed the similar function. For example, eyes of mammals and octopus are flippers of the penguins and the dolphins. They all have eyes but different in shape and structure. Okay, this is due to the similar habitat that resulted in the similar adaptive features in the different groups of organisms. That result of evolution is called the convergent evolution. So there, the evolution pattern and the structural pattern are somewhat interrelated or interconnected. We will see this through various examples. Okay, the biochemical evidences the similarities in the proteins and the genes performing a given function among the diverse organisms give hints to the common ancestry. These biochemical similarities point to the same shared ancestry as structural similarities among the diverse organisms. So the analogous organism, this is a shark fin, this is penguin's fin, and this is dolphin's fins. They all have fins, but you see the shapes and sizes and the bones different. They are all different. But what are homologous structures? Humans, cats, whales, bats. They all have limbs, but almost their function is same. Okay, function is not same. Okay, they all are homologous structure, but the function is not same. Okay, see more examples. This is homologous structure of bat, porpoise, cat, horse, human, and this is analogous. And this is also, you can see this type of pictures: flying, digging, grasping, swimming. The functions are different, but they have all same functions, purposes, as I said. So let's see different types of differences. You may look any of this, but for details, I have provided all different types of. So let's say this: they have similar basic structure and embryonic origin, and they are quite different in fundamental structure and origin. So they perform different functions. They perform the same function. Similar anatomy, dissimilar anatomy, doing similar functions, doing similar functions, dissimilar functions, doing similar functions, develop in related animals, develop in unrelated animals, inherited from common ancestor, not inherited from common ancestor, similar developmental pattern is not similar, similar structure and origin, dissimilar in structure and origin. So homologous structures are the structures developed from a common ancestor. Analogous structures are the structure species with the similar functions but not from the same ancestor. Similar in anatomy, dissimilar in function, similar in. I've said this in this, and that can be used to interfere evolution relationship among the species and cannot be used to interfere the evolution relationship among the species. Okay, it is developed by the divergent, and it is developed, I have said this, and the developed as an adaptation to the different environments, developed as an adaptation to the similar environment. So they are more or less same. You may go through any of this. So what is divergent and convergent evolution? Development of the different functional structures from the common ancestral form is called a divergent evolution. The development of the similar adaptive functional structures in unrelated groups of organisms is called the convergent evolution. So homologous organs show divergent evolution, analogous organs show convergent evolution. Examples are Darwin finches, Australian marsupials, locomotion in mammals. Examples: Australian marsupials and the placental mammals, various aquatic vertebrate, and wings of the insects and the bats. So these are the diagram you may refer to this. This is called convergent and this is called divergent. You have idea about that. So you may refer any of this. And convergent evolution is a process where distantly related species develop the similar structures as adaptations to the environment. Divergent evolution is a process by which an interbreeding species diverges into two or more descendant species. Both species live within the same environment. The species live in the different environments than their ancestor. Unrelated organisms evolve similarities while adaptive to the common environment. Divergence of the two different species results in the two species becoming less like the common ancestor. Occurs through the developing and the homologous structures. Occurs through developing analogous structures. Example includes ostrich, rheas, and emus. Examples include Darwin finches, molding structures of the vertebrates. So let's come here. You can see this is called divergent evolution, the homologous structures, and this is convergent and divergent evolution. This is divergent, you can see. And this is, you can see here it is also the evolutionary pattern is given, and sharks, dolphin, puma, how this is divergent and this is convergent. Common ancestor if it is divergent, and if the ancestor is one, then it is ancestor. This is called convergent. Okay. So evolution by natural selection or the industrial mechanism. So what was the case? The case of natural selection is seen in England in 1850s, that is before industrialization. A peppered moth, Western Vitellaria. This moth has two forms, grey color and the black color. In the early part of the 19th century, before industrialization, only the grey colored forms of moth were present. The dark forms were very rare. So grey moths were seen on the tree trunks covered with the lichens, and so they were able to escape from their enemies. Later in 1920, due to the development of the industries, post-industrialization, the lichens were killed and the tree trunks looked dark due to deposition of the industries. So birds now able to spot these moths and feed upon them. So the grey colored moths were eaten by the birds and the dark colored moths escaped from the birds. So then now the coal is replaced by the industries and the oil and electricity is used. This has reduced the shoot production and ultimately less deposition of soot on the tree trunks. These tree trunks have now again become the grey color. Consequently, the grey colored moths have again increased in number. This example clearly brings out the action of the natural selection. Now you got it? Evolution by the anthropogenic reaction, the resistance of the mosquitoes to pesticides when DDT were introduced to control mosquitoes. It was tremendously successful. Most of the mosquitoes were sensitive to DDT and were killed. In the population of the mosquitoes, few mosquitoes became resistant to DDT and survived. They multiplied and now became almost total population of the mosquitoes became resistant to DDT. Same pattern have been observed in the bacteria which were multi-drug resistant due to the excess of drugs and medicine, that is the antibiotic resistance. And the adaptive radiation, the process of the evolution of the different species in given geographical area, starting from a point of radiating to other areas of geography, that is the habitat, and it's called the adaptive radiation. The Darwin finches represent one of the best examples of the adaptive radiation. The Australian marsupials, each with a different from other, evolved from the ancestral stock but with the Australian island continents, when more than one adaptive radiation appeared to have occurred in the isolated geographical area representing the different habitats. We can call this convergent evolution as placental animals and the Australian marsupials. So what was Darwin's theory? Darwin was the most successful scientist who proposed the most acceptable theory of the favor of the organic evolution. Darwin published his work in a book in the 1859 entitled On the Origin of Species by the Means of Natural Selection and the Preservation of the Favored Races of the Structure of Life. His principal study was the variation in the characters in the finches in Galapagos Island. Darwin's principal theory, the theory of the natural selection, was derived from the observation and the derivations of certain facts in the nature. The Darwin's observations could be formulated in the form of Darwinism, which is as follows. There are several theories inherent, the prodigality of the reproduction, inherent property of all living organisms is to increase the number of the offspring at the high rate of the reproduction. As a result, the number of organisms in the increasing in geometric progression. So the constancy of the food and space, although the organisms in increase in their number, the food source and the space of living remain constant. Struggle for existence. Increase in population with constant food and shelter forces the organisms to face the competition and leads to the struggle for existence. Darwin proposes three types of struggle of existence. We will study this in later. Here, the biological evolution said the nature select for the fittest and the fitness is based on the characteristics which are inherited. Some organisms are better adapted to survive in the otherwise hostile environment. Fitness is the end result of the ability to adapt and get selected by the nature. The Lamarck has said that the evolution of life had occurred but driven by the use and the disuse of organs. He gave the example of the giraffe to evolve their neck by foraging leaves on the tall trees and had to adapt by the elongation of their necks. Branching descendant and the natural selections are the two key concepts of the Darwinian theory of the evolution. So the Darwinian theory of natural selection was based on certain observations like limited natural selections, overpopulation, competition of resources, struggle for existence, and survival of the fittest. So what I was saying that in struggle, intraspecific struggle. Okay, the struggle among the members of the definite species is known as intraspecific struggle, and the interspecific struggle, the struggle among the members of the different species is known as interspecific struggle. The environmental struggle, the struggle faced by the organisms to leave the unfavorable environmental condition is known as environmental struggle. So the variation there was also there. No two organisms found similar in all respects. Different forms of character was found in the organisms which is known as variation. Some variations are advantageous for the organic evolution, and these variations are known as the favorable variations, which are inherited generation after generation. So survival of the fittest at last point. In the struggle for the existence, the fittest organisms will survive, and these organisms must carry favorable variations. These advantages or the favorable variations are inherited to the next generation and play an important role in the origin of a species. So the organisms not having the favorable variations will be eliminated from the nature, and the plus the natural selections. And the what is natural selections? The organisms having the favorable variations and the fittest in the struggle for the existence are getting advantage in the nature and are selected in the nature, which is known as natural selections. The unfit organisms are rejected or eliminated in the nature. So the origin of new species, the favorable variations in the nature selected organisms gradually accumulated in each generations in the process of the adaptation in the existing environment. So due to the accumulation of the favorable variations in many generations, the new generation of organisms formed are found characteristically different in the form of early parental generations. This new group of organisms which all accumulated adaptive characters then achieved reproductive isolation and parental generation is known as new species, or the origin of the species is said to occur. So here you can see a family tree of dinosaurs and their living modern day counterparts like crocodiles and birds. And in this picture is also available in your book, biology book. You may refer to this, and which this picture showing convergent evolution, and this is known as adaptive radiation of marsupials of Australia. So thanks for watching. Have a great day.